Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and groceries. We're going to talk about the groceries themselves. We're going to talk about grocery shopping. We're going to talk about the strategies that you use as a consumer and the strategies that companies use to get you to buy more money because at the end of the day, right, they're out to make money and they're out to get you to spend as much as you possibly can. And we're going to talk about all those things and how math is used in all of that, right? And more. So yeah, let's get into it. So recently, I went to the grocery store and I walked away with some food for thought. Okay, it's bad. It's bad, and I can admit that it's bad. But with that being said, more seriously speaking, like I was thinking of comparing grocery stores to one another, right? There's many types of grocery stores out there, right? And that term may change depending on what region you're in the world. So I mean it how we mean it in the U.S., like a store that mainly sells foods, and there's layers to that. But with that in mind, I went into like Aldi recently. I'm used to saying Aldi's, but it's actually Aldi, so I'll try to keep to that. But yeah, so with Aldi, they're a smaller type of grocery chain, right? They're not going to have every single food like let's say like Giant have, like every sort of type of food. But what they are going to have is cheaper food. And what's interesting about that is you still have to be careful. And I say that because since a lot of items are cheaper, it can be tempting to go in and say, okay, well, since this is cheaper, maybe I'll get a little bit more of this item or a little bit more of that item. Things can still add up. And you notice there's a lot of math and just describing how that goes, right? And that's the key, right? There's a lot of math in food. There's a lot of math in the cost of food. There's a lot of math in the strategies used to buy it and sell it. And when you're going into a grocery store, it pays to have a strategy, right? You have a budget, right? You have a certain amount of money that you can afford to spend. So you have to be careful. You have to think about how many items can you get. You have to think about the cost of those items and of those individual items, how many items can you get. And you also want to think about the kind of meals that you're making, right? Because like, hey, do I want to buy these items in bulk and then make some meals for like later on? Like, do I want to make like a lot of something and then like freeze the rest so I'm good for a while? Can I afford to do that? These are things that you want to think about, right? And there's math and all that. And then on the flip side, right, there's math in the grocery stores themselves and how these chains try to get you to pay as much money as possible. Because at the end of the day, right, like, they're setting the prices, they're choosing the items, and yes, you can deduce that much. But one of the other things is, where are these items? How do they look? How do they smell? What are they designed to do? When a store comes up with, displays and where they place their item, there's a lot of deliberate action that has taken place, and there's a lot of math in it. And if you notice in some grocery stores, you might come in and you might smell certain things. Like it's not uncommon for the bakery to be one of the first things you see, or in some grocery stores, it might be the first thing that you smell. And the way ventilation is set up in the stores, that's key, right? And you might hear some calming music. That's also key. You might see certain items on the end cap. That's key. You might see certain items at the register, and that's key. Everything has been calculated, right? There's math all across the board. And so it's you versus their grocery stores. You have a need, they have the supply, but you got to decide how you want to buy what you need. And again, it pays to have a strategy. And if you're in a bigger store like Giant, where they have the traditional carts and they have the small shopping carts, you might want to adjust accordingly. Because I know like sometimes, right, I'll get a small shopping cart because if I go into the grocery store, there's gonna be stuff that I'm seeing that may make me want to buy it. But if I have a small shopping cart, right, or sorry, like a small cart, then I'm going to buy less most likely because I'm not going to be able to carry it. Or I might go in and not get a cart, big or small, right? I might just go in with my hands because there's only so much I can carry, and maybe I get what I need at the immediate moment and then come back in shorter trips. And you also have to consider gas. You also have to consider how much you're getting paid. And then the other thing is like, right, are you buying for yourself? Are you buying for family members? That's all key. And I mentioned like bigger chains like Giant, but like in a place like Aldi's, I didn't see like the smaller carts. I just saw like the regular size big carts. And in their case, it's interesting because like you have to put a quarter in to be able to use that, but you can get it back at the end. And even though like they have lower cost for foods, when you get to the register, they don't bag for you. You can bring in your own bags or you can buy them, and then you got to decide what you want to do when you're at that stage, right? Like, because if you bring in your own bags, right, you're not spending anything. If you pay bags there, you're not going to be spending a lot, but you need to decide what you want to do with it. Or you're going to do paper, or you're going to do plastic. You need to ask yourself what's cheaper, what makes sense, and then since you're the one bagging, you got to decide how you want to put your items, and there's math in that and how you're deciding those things, and that's pretty cool to me. Um, and of course, if you're at a regular grocery store like Giant, a lot of places have like different aisles where you can wait on yourself, and you have to consider the same thing. Like, well, how do I want to do this and that for my items? But yeah, so there's a couple more things I want to talk about though. But I kind of wanted to sum up everything that I've said to this point. Right? There's a lot of math that goes into buying groceries. There's a lot of math that goes into selling groceries. There's a lot of strategy in it too, and math in that strategy. And you have to have a good idea of your situation. Like, are you buying groceries for yourself? Are you buying it for more people? What makes sense for your situation, right? Going with a budget, going with a plan. Because if you go in knowing that the store is designed to make you want to buy more, you can counter that, right? And the other thing is you might have coupons, you might have like a membership card, and those things do help with certain items. And you really got to ask yourself what you need. And I think all that is key. And not only is there math in all of that, but there's math in what you need in terms of diet, right? Because you might need this or that, or there's a more eloquent way to say that, right? You might need a certain amount of like this or that. I don't know why I'm struggling with it, but you might need a certain amount of vitamins per day, and you have to adjust for that. You might need a certain amount of other things. I don't know. It is escaping me at this moment, but you get my point, right? We all have nutritional needs, and we might need a certain amount of fruit, a certain amount of veggies, a certain amount of protein a day, and we might want to use all that to adjust our purchases. And I think that's pretty cool, and there's a lot of math in all of that. You can strategize and strategize and strategize and go in there with a plan, and you'd be surprised how little you spend if you're careful. But with that in mind, I think it's also worth noting that the grocery stores themselves, you know, they have a lot of math to consider, because it's not just with what they're selling to you and how they sell it to you, it's how they're getting in their food, right? Because maybe they're buying it from farmers, maybe they're buying it from other companies, and maybe they're getting other companies to make stuff for them, like, you know, generic brands, right? There's a lot of math in how all that functions and flows, and then a lot of places these days have online options, and there's a lot of math in that and how that works logistically. And then on your end, there's still the same math that you were dealing before, although you don't have to worry about you know, certain items, or sorry, or like seeing certain items because you're going through the aisles. Though certain sites might, you know, say, oh, are you sure you're done shopping? Here's these items. But I feel like, to me, it's easier to avoid on a computer. But you know, there's trade-offs, right? Because you're gonna pay like a delivery fee, and if you know, you want a tip, which I recommend, but you know, to each their own, I guess. But the point is, you're gonna pay more for a tip. You're gonna pay more for delivery, and that's not the sort of thing that you have to do if you're in person. But at the same time, you don't have to spend as much time shopping as you would in person, most likely, right? But you have to be in the same spot for a while, right? Because a lot of these places, they're gonna have like 2 hour windows that you have to be there, but you could be doing other stuff while you wait. But my whole point is, there's a lot of math in how all this functions and flows and the kind of decisions that you're making, and I think that's really cool. And given that, you know, we all have to eat, all this ends up being pretty key because right, there's a lot of math in food, there's a lot of math in groceries, there's a lot of math and cooking, and there's a lot of math and decision making involved in all of that sort of stuff, and whether or not you eat at restaurants, that's going to be a factor in things too, because like if you don't, you could make some adjustments, but I mean if you do, you have to make different adjustments either way. um, that sort of stuff factors in. Same if you're like getting snacks along the way, you want to be careful with that too. My whole point is that there's a lot of math going on when it comes to groceries, and there's a lot of math in the decision making that you make and that companies make. And honestly, there's no doubt even more stuff that I could talk about. And if you have anything to add, please do. But I hope this gives you a better idea about the math that goes into groceries. Because see, here's the thing. I think it's cool about that. Right, that's an everyday sort of thing, right? It's something that we all do. We all grocery shop. We all go out and get food, and there's math in that. There's math everywhere, and what we do in school is just like a small fraction of a larger whole, and that is important to remember. We don't always teach it that way, and that's a shame because I feel like a lot of times, right, we get right up to the point and miss it in terms of like what's the whole point of math in school, which is like context, right? Like the truth is we're doing math whether we're in the classroom or not. It's just that when we're in a classroom, we're learning the language, we're learning the problem solving aspect, and it would be really useful to have context, right? Because that's literally the point. The reason why we do math in classroom is to make more sense of the world and what we're doing, to say something about the past, the present, the future, ourselves, the universe. But we don't always touch on that. But with these sort of videos that I'm making, I hope that that gets you thinking. I hope that that gets you excited. I hope that that gets you adding to the conversation. And please feel free to talk to me. It's what I want. Have a great day. Professor Prime out.